Hi friends, my name is Emily. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about The 100,000 Kingdoms by NK Jemisin. So this is the first book in the Inheritance Trilogy. It was on my TBR for February, which is focusing on books by Black authors for Black History Month. The link for my February TBR video will be linked in the cards and in the description box if you are interested in seeing what else I'm reading this month. This book was voted on by my patrons and I loved it. So I do have some notes here on names and pronunciations, just if you see me looking down, that's what I'm doing. Yenneigh is half Aramari, half Dare. Her mother was the former Aramari heir. So Aramari are white people and they live in like the city's capital, and the Aramari are the rulers of the world. It's like literally how they think about themselves. They are massive conquerors of the world, and so Dare people are one of the lands conquered by the Aramari. They are a country of dark-skinned folks located on a piece of land near the country's equator. It is quite jarring for Yenneigh when she comes to the Aramari and is staying in this floating palace in the sky. So the book opens with some pretty clear political messaging, some pretty clear discussions about race are happening because the Aramari view the Dare as barbaric. And I feel like we can see definite ties to our own politics there. On top of that, we learn that Yenneigh is grieving the death of her mother. Her mother has been murdered shortly before she is called to the city by the ruler of the Aramari, Decarta, who is her grandfather and her mother's father. She sort of goes there not really knowing what to expect, but discovers very quickly that he intends to make her heir to the Aramari throne, the Aramari kingdom. The catch is that she is now one of three, so he has also named her cousins heirs, which means that there is going to be this power struggle, now a three-way power struggle instead of a two-way power struggle. And so part of what Yenneigh is trying to work out is, what is the motivation for this? Who is going to be heir? Like, what is going on here? There's another level to this, which is the gods. The gods sort of latch on to Yenneigh, and there is some political scheming happen because these gods are fallen gods. So we have Nahadoth, he's a proper god, and he is the sibling of the god that is worshipped. He is also the sibling of a god that is dead, Enifa, and so these three gods have all sorts of incestual godlings, just like in the Greek pantheon or the Roman pantheon. And so there are also three fallen godlings. These fallen gods and godlings are enslaved to the Aramari people. They have been magicked in such a way that they cannot harm any Aramari, and they have to obey orders. And so one of the most, I think, perverse things there is Ca, who is childlike in nature and appearance, is ordered to do sexual things with adult Aramari. And so we can see like an abuse of power, in addition to having them be gods with magical powers, treated as weapons to keep that ruler of the world status. We also see a massive abuse of power as well. We're very much alongside Yenneigh as outsiders in this Aramari state, which is very cruel and harsh and just unpleasant, especially in compared to the Dare views on things, which we have access to through Yenneigh's perspective. I think a lot of the things that we're witnessing are clearly direct parallels to our world. And what's really cool is that it allows readers an access point to think about wider political things, ways of resisting, ways of differently organizing our society without being like super overtly political or didactic. It's clearly a story with political messaging, but it still feels like a fun magical fantasy story, and I feel like that is one of the greatest things about fantasy literature, is its potential to be subversive, to open up windows into other ways of thinking and being that we can learn from and think about in terms of our own real world society, like the primary world that we all live in, opposed to this fantasy secondary space, right? I feel like the novel does a great job of thinking through and unpacking in like a tangential way structures of oppression in our society today. I think this is far more accessible. Like, you're more likely to get people to read this than any sort of nonfiction text that does similar work. And I feel like that is the power of fantasy literature. Books like this are why I love this genre so much, because there is so much room in the genre to play and to critique and to think about change, think about systems of oppression. Editing Emily here, I realized when I was watching back this footage that I got so sucked into the world building, which is phenomenal, that I didn't really talk about character. Now, in part, that's because I feel like, for me, my favorite character, well, I have two, and that is Yane, our protagonist, and Nahadoth, one of the gods. And I feel like you can't really talk about either of those characters without spoiling large parts of the narrative. Maybe it will be something to get into when I review the second book in the series, because I do plan on reading the rest of the series and reviewing it, and I feel like once you get into the second book, the first book is fair game, right? But I just want you to know that I'm intentionally leaving them out in terms of talking about their development and what I like about those characters. Just as another side note, something that I didn't talk about, the Dare society is matriarchal. There's this moment in the text where Yane talks about how the men are like these precious things that they keep at home, while the women go out and fight wars because it makes more sense to keep bigger, stronger people home with the children as a last line of defense. And I just thought that that was such an interesting thing to think about, because I feel like often, like, I mean, historically in our own world, men have historically gone out to war because they are bigger and stronger and all that patriarchy-inspired characteristics, right? Like, historically, women bearers of children have been kept in the home to continue to care for the children, and they end up this, like, really untrained last line of defense. It's like all built on the assumption that the men will not fail. Whereas the matriarchal society, the Dare society, is like, this is a really dumb thing. It makes more sense to train our women to put them out in the field and then to keep the larger, stronger members of our society back with the children as caregivers, as a last line of defense. And I just thought that was such a little golden moment that I absolutely adored. Now, obviously, this is within the Dare society only, and the Dare are thought of as being barbaric for their strange views on gender and ordering of society, right? And there are many moments like that throughout the series where Jemisin has taken something from our own world and subverted it in some way, and that is really interesting. Back to the present Emily. Back to past Emily? Back to original Emily. I loved it. I absolutely loved this book. It was a fantastic way to start the month, and so I'm very happy that I read it. I have moved on to two other books rather than continuing right into the trilogy, because if you saw my TBR video, you know that I had a wide range of books from various Black authors from all around the world, various genres. Because I don't want to just read one author for Black History Month, I have not jumped into the series, but it was so hard not to jump into the series because I was absolutely blown away by this book. This is a perfect example of what fantasy literature as a genre, what fantasy as a genre can do, the potential this genre has. Would highly recommend it if you haven't read it, and I am so excited to continue with the trilogy. So let me know your thoughts on The 100,000 Kingdoms in the comments down below. Have you read it? Do you want to read it? And let me know your favorite new voices in fantasy literature. What books have you seen in sci-fi and fantasy that are pushing boundaries, changing the genres, playing with old tropes in new ways? Let's make some sort of excellent reading list down below, because that would be very exciting. Also, we need to thank my patrons whose support makes this content possible. Thank you, patrons. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye!